Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about 6.3, and we're going to talk about monomials and polynomials. We're going to look at a lot of different terms and stuff. And in the rest of the chapter, we're going to work on them. We're going to work on adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials and monomials. So a monomial is a number, a variable, or a multiplication, so product multiplication, of numbers and variables with whole number exponents. So whole number means that they have to be positive and not fractions. And so because they have to be positive exponents, they can't, and since the exponents can't be negative, that means that if there is a variable on the bottom of the fraction, then that's not allowed either. So for example, we have this, just the number 5. It is a number, so it is a monomial. And then we have x. It is a variable, so it's a monomial. And then we have negative 7xy, which is a monomial because it's a number being multiplied by two variables. And then here 0.5x to the fourth, which is a number being multiplied by a variable. And our exponent there is a whole number, so we're good to go. So here, this is not a monomial because of our power is to the negative 2. And so that is wrong. We can't have the negative exponents. That's not good. Now here, this is not a monomial because I am adding or subtracting two monomials. This is actually a polynomial because I have the monomial 4x and the monomial negative y. So there's actually two monomials together, which makes it a polynomial. So we have two terms when really we can only have one term with a monomial. And then here, this is not okay because we have the x on the bottom, which really means that it's x to the negative third power, which is not positive. So now we can, once we know what a monomial is, we can talk about the degree of a monomial. And the degree of the monomial is the sum of the exponents of the variables. So when I'm looking at my monomial, I want to look at those exponent variables. So my degree here is 2 plus 3, because those are the exponents of the variables x and y. So my degree would be 5. And then on my next example, I have x to the fifth, and this is really a y to the first power. So a y to the first and a z to the first. So our degree here would be 5 plus 1 plus 1, which is 7. And then our last one, we have no variables whatsoever, so our degree is 0. And that's how we find the degree of a monomial. Now a polynomial, so this is slightly different, is a monomial. So a monomial is also a polynomial, or a bunch of monomials being added and subtracted together. And so every monomial that we have in a polynomial is called a term. So every time we have an addition or subtraction, that's separating our terms. And so when we're looking at polynomials, so we have a degree of a monomial, and then we have degree of polynomials. Now the degree of a polynomial means I have to find the degree of each monomial, and whichever one's the highest is the degree of my polynomial. So here, let me actually use a pen here. My degree of my first term is 3, because that's my exponent here. The degree of my second term is 7, because that's my exponent for the x. So the degree of the polynomial is 7, because that's the highest. So then if I look at my next problem, the degree of each term, so this is, the degree of this one's 3, because 2 plus 1. The degree of this one is 2, because 1 plus 1. And the degree of the last one is 5. So the degree of my polynomial is 5, because that's my highest one. And for my next one, the degree of each term, so the degree of the first term is 1. The degree of the second term is 0, because there's no x's or y's, no variable whatsoever. So the degree of my polynomial would be 1. Now, we also have something called the standard form of a polynomial. And the standard form of our polynomial that contains one variable is written with the terms in order from the greatest degree to the least degree. So when written in standard form, we call that descending order. The highest exponent down to the lowest exponent. And then when written in standard form, the coefficient of the first term is called a leading coefficient. So when I'm looking at all these different terms, I want to figure out which one of these has the highest exponent. And so the x to the fifth is that highest exponent. So that's negative 7 x to the fifth would go first. And then I move down to the next one. So x to the second is next, so plus 4x squared. We always take the sign of what's in front of our coefficient. So that coefficient's 4, so that's going to be a plus 4 because the plus is right in front of the 4. And then I move on to my positive 6x, and then my positive 9. So that is in standard form, and my leading coefficient is negative 7 because that's the number in front of the first term. So on my next one, we're going to go ahead and find the one with the highest exponent, y to the sixth. And then our next one, y to the second, and that's positive. And our last one, negative 3y. And our leading coefficient, since there's no number in front here, there's really an invisible 1. And our leading coefficient is 1. So in our next one, we're looking for the highest exponent, x to the fifth. So x to the fifth comes first. And then next, 9x to the third. And then next, negative 4x squared. And last, positive 16. Our leading coefficient is the number in front of x to the fifth. And if there is no number, it's actually the number 1. Next one, negative 3y to the eighth. That's our highest exponent. Plus 18y to the fifth. And then plus 14y. Our leading coefficient is negative 3. Okay, and we're almost done here. Now we're going to look at polynomials, and we're going to classify them in 2 different ways. Our first method of classifying is the degree of the polynomial. So remember where we find the degree of each term, and the highest degree is the degree of the polynomial. So if my degree is 0, we call it a constant. If my degree is 1, it's linear. If my degree is 2, it's quadratic. If my degree is 3, it's cubic. If my degree is 4, it's quartic. Degree is 5, it's quintic. And then anything higher than 5, we just say 6th degree, 7th degree, so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. So here, my degree is 3, and then here my degree is 1. So the degree of the polynomial is 3 because it was the highest, which means that it's cubic. So now I'm going to move to my next one. I'm going to look at my degree of each term. So the degree here is 2, the degree here is 1, and the degree here is 0 because there is no variable, which means the degree of my polynomial is the highest number, which is 2. So when I go to my list, it means it's a quadratic. Okay, my next one only has one term, and that exponent is 1. So that means my degree is 1, and the degree of my polynomial is also 1, which means that it is linear. Okay, for my next one, my degree here is 5. My degree here is 1, which means the degree of the polynomial is 5. And that makes it a quintic. Okay, my next one, that looks like the number 6. Yep, number 6, which means that there is no x, so my degree of that is 0, which means the degree of the polynomial is 0, which means it is a constant. My next one, the degree, the first one's 4, the next one's 2, and then 1, and then 0. So the degree of the polynomial is 4. Which means if I go back to my list, it's a quartic. Now, I recommend writing flashcards for these because this is something you will have to have memorized for the test. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the number of terms. So how many monomials is there in the polynomial? If there's one term, it's called a monomial. 2 terms is a binomial, bi for 2, like bicycle, 2 wheels. 3 for trinomial, like tricycle, 3 wheels. And then anything 4 and up is called just a polynomial. So when I'm looking here, I have 1, 2 terms. Remember, pluses and minuses separate the terms. So I have 2 terms, which means it is a binomial. Then here I have 1, 2, 3 terms, which means it's a trinomial. And here I have 1 term, so it's a monomial. Our next one, I have 1, 2 terms, so it is a binomial. And then here I have 1 term, so it is a monomial. And then here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, so it is a polynomial. And that's what we're going to practice in class tomorrow. I hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you in class.